Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Good evening, and hopefully you're not getting a little black box across the middle of the screen. Hopefully that's just on the monitor. My name is Bill Morse, and I want to welcome you to another edition of What Do You Think? Today is Thursday, May 26, 2022, and this is Oliver. Oliver is co-hosting with me and keeping me company here for the next 20-25 minutes. The original plan was not to do a program before Memorial Day weekend because I was not going to be in the area, but plans changed, and I'm glad to be able to be with you for a short period of time because a lot is going on, and some of it I do want to touch upon. Maybe you're aware of this or maybe you are not, but evidently the last couple of days there was a major election in Pakistan, and the better candidate, in many people's opinion, those who want a stronger democracy in Pakistan, the better candidate was eliminated in what many people see as a rigged election. Many people in not just Islamabad, the capital, but also in the rest of Pakistan. And because they felt so strongly that the election was rigged, they brought things to a standstill. There are images coming from Islamabad of squares filled with people, angry people, but peaceful people, and all streets, roads, highways going in and out of the capital are jammed packed with people who have stopped their vehicles. Well, if the person in front of you isn't moving, the person behind you isn't moving, you're not moving. And this was in protest against what many people feel was a rigged election for the next president. And in response to this pressure of stopping everything until there was a recount, the government has agreed to a new election with more people involved in the monitoring process. And I cheered inside myself, and the other person with me who actually brought this story to my attention was cheering because this is a win for democracy. And I find it ironic that the countries with the shortest history of a fair democratic representation of their government, or reflected in their government, often are the most vocal, the most ready to put everything down and activate themselves in a unified manner of protest and stopping everything until the situation is corrected and clean elections are offered. So I wish the people of Pakistan good luck, and I applaud their standing up for democracy, standing up for clean elections, to the point where they put their lives on hold. And again, I find it ironic that countries with the youngest democracies are often the most fervent supporters. And I'm sure more than 40% came out to vote which unfortunately is the case here in our country. We have maybe 40% that bother to vote. In Pakistan, evidently, the disillusionment with democracy has not ingrained itself in their society. So, what I wanted to talk about today was the last 4 years. The last 4 years, it seems like 4 years. The last 4 days in Davos, Switzerland. On this program, you've heard me talk about The Great Reset, which is a paperback book that was, written in early 2020 by Klaus Schwab. And in The Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, who is a banker, I should say a financier, he's an economist. He holds these meetings of very influential people, or people who he thinks will be influential. And they attend a group of seminars that span over 3 or 4 days. The seminars for this particular meeting, which is the first live meeting in 3 years, were very varied, were very different. They ranged from climate change, obviously, to the front and center is the war in the Ukraine, and other issues that are not as much medical issues, future pandemics, future needs for vaccinations, etc. And in The Great Reset, Klaus Schwab and his organization, the World Economic Forum, basically advocate for a one-rule government whereby there are no wars, there are no famines, population is greatly reduced, people are encouraged to live healthier lives through the use of pharmaceuticals, and we can get into that later. What I don't see in The Great Reset book, and what I don't see really in the seminars that I visited, and you can check these seminars out for yourself. Go to World Economic Forum, WEF, and you will see go to Davos, which is a small resort in the mountains of Switzerland, and you will see the schedule for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for this summit of, I will say, world leaders. World leaders who fall within a certain narrative. There are not widely ranging opinions expressed. It's basically a seminar whereby the view of a one world order through the Great Reset is what's being preached. Kind of like the sermon that you might expect in a worship service, a church service. It's pretty much one approach to how they view the world should manage itself through a central government. And what brought this issue, or what brought the meeting or seminars to my attention, was we have a Vermonter who is a participant. He's what you would call a senior statesman, and he started serving the public as, I believe, the Chittenden County public prosecutor in the 60s and 70s, maybe just the 70s. And he later ran for the Senate. Very much of a big jump. And he took the spot from Claude Aiken, who was the former governor of Vermont in the late 30s, the 40s, and I believe George Aiken was senator for Vermont after serving governor through the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. Again, another long-serving public servant. And he was a Republican because up until about the early 70s, Vermont was a Republican state. And then with the influx of people from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, etc., New Jersey, the political climate turned, and you had people coming from the outside who sought to remake the state more in the image of what they thought the state how the state should operate. So, also there was the 70s through Watergate and the war in Vietnam, other issues. There was a lot of acrimony towards the Republicans, and so this prosecutor from Chittenden had a relatively easy time running as a Democrat and winning the one of two seats as a Senate representative in Washington for Vermont. His name, of course, is Patrick Leahy, and he has been serving as one of two of Vermont's senators since 1978. He's, I believe, the longest-serving member of the Senate in the current group, and he is not seeking re-election. He's not running for re-election this summer, or this summer. Another Democrat, former Congressman, or currently Congressman Peter Welch, is running for Patrick Leahy's Senate seat, and the elections will be this November on the 8th, Tuesday the 8th. Anyway, getting back to Senator Patrick Leahy's participation in the World Economic Forum at Davos on Monday. He was one of a group of American congressmen and senators that participated in a discussion called The View from Capitol Hill. And I've looked at seminars from past Davos summits, and I think this is the first time such a seminar has been put together. And I thought it unique because everybody on the panel, of course, was from the United States, and one in particular was from Vermont. So I wanted to listen and take notes, and I thought I would share these notes with you. All the members I can try to recite offhand. You'll recognize some of their names, perhaps. One was the Democratic senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. He was there. Joe stood out kind of because they're all seated on the dais, left to right, and the commentator or the moderator for the program, the discussion, the questions and answers, is seated on the far left side, and her name was Mrs. or Ms. Beddoe. I believe she's from somewhere in the UK, judging by her accent. And Joe was the only person not wearing black patent leather shoes. Anyway, funny little things that you notice when you have a row of people sitting facing you on a dais or a elevated platform. Also there was Bob Menendez, who is a another long-serving, like I want to say almost 40 years, I would say, from New Jersey, Bob Menendez. There was a Miss Fisher, a senator from Nebraska, who I hadn't seen before. There was also a congressman. No, let's finish with the senators. Senator Roger Wicker. I forget where Senator Wicker is from. There was a, who else? Well, anyway, I'll introduce them as they come up. And Patrick Leahy, being the most senior of the legislators present, was given the opportunity to speak out first. And the discussion was $40 billion in aid that the Senate okayed for helping Ukraine. Now, that aid is both humanitarian and military. For people who don't know the situation, the reason there's a war in the Ukraine, first of all, Ukraine was part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, or USSR, and then the USSR broke up. The Soviet Union broke up in 1989, and so Ukraine became an independent country, even though the borders were not officially registered, which sounds kind of odd. But it was a country, and it was a country before being annexed by through the 1917 October Revolution. I believe Ukraine became part of the Soviet Union in the 1920s. And so it always had it had before a certain autonomy. There is a Ukrainian language, definitely a culture, and but also there is a you have Russia, and then west of Russia is the Ukraine. Excuse me. And part of the Ukraine has a Russian enclave called the Donbass, and these are ethnically Russian people that are on the other side of the border of Russia and Ukraine. And there has been a history of the last, I'd say, since the current administration, which is Volodymyr Zelensky, 2014, there's been kind of hostilities, or I'm not going to say a war, but there's been fighting in the Donbass. I guess you could call it a war. So, excuse me. And that's been going on, as I said, since 2014. Russians on the Russian side of the border, especially Putin, have been trying to, when possible, safeguard or do something for ethnic Russians that are outside their official borders. You probably remember it was sometime, I'm going to guess 2016, that Russia annexed Crimea, and Crimea was part of the Ukraine. And according to the news stories I hear, the people were glad to have to be part of Russia as opposed to part of the Ukraine, because they speak the Russian language, and it's more Russian culture than Ukrainian. The same in the Donbass. These are ethnic Russians and Russian culture, and they had been under attack because of a separatist movement that wanted autonomy for the Donbass. So, using that and other reasons that we'll discuss later, Vladimir Putin directed his army to invade, and also his air force to invade land space and airspace in Ukraine. And the first area they secured was Donbass as kind of a relief effort in stopping the the fighting there and the persecution of the Russians. We have also found out that there was a threat of biological warfare. Again, this is the Russian version. And evidently a number of biolabs have been discovered, and evidence has been taken from these biolabs in Ukraine that show a program underway of creating viruses that would then be unleashed in Russia. And the viruses are genetically engineered to make people very sick, and like the virus we had, COVID, slow or break their economy, and also ultimately mean the death of quite a few people, especially older or people in poor health. The world is waiting for evidence of these biolabs, if they did exist, and I'm confident that that evidence will come out, because I know that through our sponsorship, the Department of Defense, there are biolabs around the world working on viruses, and they exist in Taiwan, they exist in China, they exist around the world, and it's really an issue that's not discussed, and there seems to be no public oversight. I was totally unaware that there were any biolabs anywhere, but obviously COVID, my personal belief, was started in a biolab. And unlike the opinion in the Great Reset, which goes with the story that COVID started as a animal flu in a market where animals were sold, in Wuhan. Well, Wuhan also is where the biolab is located, and whether it was an accidental release or intentional, we still don't know. We are still not given the true story as to the origins of the virus, and now the narrative is switching to another virus. So my opinion, we're being played again. Says the man who can't stop coughing. Not bothering you, though, is it? No, the virus is not designed to. The virus is not bioengineered to affect little dogs, especially furry dogs. So, according to Vladimir Putin and many of the Russian people, they are in the Ukraine because they could not have a threat on their border, that being the biolabs, and also another threat, though not quite as sinister, is the presence of NATO. Now, NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was a presence that has been there since the end of World War II. The Soviets had the Warsaw Pact, which protected armed group of Eastern European and Russian military forces that were there to protect Eastern Europe from aggression coming from the West. And we had the NATO group, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which protected Western Europe from Soviet-sponsored attack coming from the East. So the Warsaw Pact is gone. In fact, in Warsaw there are NATO troops. NATO has expanded. In the north, Finland now wants to join NATO, as does Sweden, I believe. The Baltic states, which were former Soviet Union members, the Baltic states are now NATO. Poland, as I said, is NATO. NATO wanted to move in further into, expand further into the Ukraine, and that would bring NATO right to Russia's border. And that would kind of be like the Russians setting up rocket bases in the Bahamas. Would we tolerate Soviet military presence, or Russian military presence, or Chinese military presence for that matter? Would we tolerate them being in Mexico or in the Bahamas setting up shop for military exercises? No, of course we wouldn't, which is why we had the standoff with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, for the same reason of keeping a safe distance from a potential enemy, we want this space. Well, evidently Russia wants space too, and they do not want weapons that could be used against them on their border. Certainly not biolabs. Again, I am waiting, and I think this will happen before the end of the summer, for evidence, proof that there were, number one, biolabs in the Ukraine, supposedly 32 biolabs. And secondly, that evidence is produced from these biolabs, evidence captured by Russian forces that show a program designed to introduce viruses into Russia. I'm waiting for that proof. Because this hasn't been discussed, but there's some reason. There is a reason why Russia has gone on a costly war against against a smaller neighbor. So our response has been $40 billion in aid, and many Americans, all the Congress people and senators present at this seminar at Davos were in favor of this $40 million. In fact, they had on their lapels a blue and yellow Ukrainian flag and an American flag as a show of solidarity. So, when I heard Patrick Leahy speak, when I heard the other senators and Congress people speak, the first thing that kind of came to my mind is the emotional drive of their decision to send this money over to the Ukraine, this $40 billion. Now, this is $40 billion. As far as I know, there is no plan to supervise how that money is spent. I know that Senator Rand Paul, who was one of 11 senators to vote against the $40 billion in aid, said that he wanted an inspector general assigned to follow where this $40 billion goes once it leaves Washington, once it leaves the printing shop. Because we don't have $40 billion. We had to make $40 billion, which is part of the reason why you and I are facing 8.5% and up inflation. We keep printing money. We don't have the value to back that money. We don't have the gold. We don't have the work. We don't have anything. Only the paper that it's printed on. And so as you continue to print more money, yeah, I know. as we continue to print more money, that money is worth less and less and less. So that's part of it. Also, the fact that we are no longer energy independent. We, since the regime change, we are now energy dependent on outside sources. And through making that conscious decision, we have added 50% more to heating bills, 20% more to gasoline bills. So actually more than that, because since the regime change, gas has gone from 267 to 467, actually up over 5 in some places. And I'm not talking about diesel, what truckers use or other commercial enterprises, and it's much more. So, and everything is moved either by truck or rail, so the cost is going to be more. And so it's the printing of the money is increasing our debt, and that was another issue that was brought up. But a motion carried the day with most of the speakers at this, with all the speakers at this forum, and Patrick Leahy was one of them. And I found myself, after listening to Senator Leahy talk a couple of times, as well as the others, I started wondering what their news sources were. Where are they getting their information from? Is their information solely from CNN? Because they were referring to war crimes, and war crimes being people shot in cold blood, civilians, civilian apartment blocks being targeted, rocket blasted, and war crimes committed by Putin's military forces. And I thought, well, what are you watching? Who is responsible for what you see? And mainstream media, and I include that public radio, National Public Radio, the public broadcast system, PBS, Fox, and even some of the online news channels that are better known, were using falsified or misleading video and audio coverage. I mentioned this once before. Some of the footage that CNN or the others showed was video game footage or footage from other conflicts, maybe Syria, maybe other places in the Middle East. So I would hope that our senators and congressmen are not basing their opinions on what they see through mainstream media. Mainstream media does not give an unfiltered view of the world. Again, it is very... the scope of the world that you are seeing is through a kind of a very small lens, and it's a lens that can surgically remove information from a story that is unwanted. I'll give you one example. There was this story of a rescue of people that were, of soldiers and hostages that were trapped in a tunnel complex under a factory or a mine in Ukraine. And the Western news crews were showing the people being rescued and being fed and given water and given medical care. Now, the fact that these forces that were giving the care were Russian was suppressed. In other words, they were careful with the video not to show anything that it would indicate who these soldiers or who these rescue efforts were coming from. And they were, of course, they were in essence Russian military forces that had liberated this group of people and had the unpleasant or unenviable task of separating hostages from armed combatants who were holding the hostages. Fortunately, it worked out, but when Western media made sure that Russian military did not receive any credit. So this kind of reporting, biased, it's when there are actual misdeeds or when there are actual atrocities, they're not credible because of the misreporting that often happens and discredits the news source. So I'm hopeful that I'm not sure that they are getting news that's not been doctored. I know Trump, when he entered the White House, he was ridiculed because he would not blindly follow the intelligence reports that were coming in on his desk. He did not believe blindly what he was being told, and for good reason. You've got to know the intent of the people that are informing you. What is their intent? What's their goal? How are they shaping, or how are they preparing this news for your information? Anyway, so my question is, I don't think the senators and congressmen are getting the right story or full story. Let's say they're not getting the full story. Also, a couple of the senators brought up the fact that we are going to be facing, or the world could potentially face, a food shortage because grain from the Ukraine is not being allowed to leave the port of Odessa on the Black Sea. And the story is that Putin is holding these grain shipments hostage as a way of pressuring the Ukraine to surrender its military forces. Well, a couple of days ago, on a number of different internet channels, news channels, they showed a water mine that had washed up on a beach near Odessa. It looked like something from World War II. It was a ball, black iron ball with studs sticking out. And these studs have plungers, and if a large ship, let's say a ship, the hull of a ship going through the water hits one of these plungers, it detonates the bomb or the mine. Well, it was a Russian group that came in and disarmed the bomb. They moved it and they blew it off safely in a field. Who had placed the mines near the harbor? Well, the Ukrainians admitted that it was their forces that had mined the harbor of Odessa and other water locations. So if the area was mined to keep Russian naval forces out of Odessa, these same mines are keeping grain shipments from leaving Odessa because by rail is not practical due to the conflicts on land. Water is more of a protected route in that the containers would not draw the fire from Russian naval or air sources. So the senators and the congressmen said, well, this is going to be a famine situation and it's Putin's fault. Well, actually, it's not Putin's fault. It's poor planning on Zelensky's part, the mining of these harbors backfired. And supposedly, and this is questionable, they are not able to trace these mines. In other words, their locations where they were planted has not been divulged, and mines float and go with the current, the tides, which is why this one mine wound up on a beach. The mines are not tethered to the water bottom, so that they're immobile. They actually float around, and some of the mines float away, and some of the mines stay in the harbor area. So it's not so black and white. First off, finding out what actually is happening through truthful reporting is difficult. Secondly, we're reporting from an area halfway around the world. It's going to have to be a wait and see moment. And I don't think, personally, sending more weapons over there is going to bring the conflict to a quicker end. I would rather see the suffering end. Putin is actually already withdrawing his forces. I'm waiting again for this evidence that shows persecution. Well, there is evidence showing persecution of ethnic Russians in the Donbass area. I think the Russians will establish a neutrality zone in the Donbass area whereby they will offer protection to the ethnic Russians. And once they have collected their information on the biolabs and on the corruption, because corruption is another issue under the Zelensky administration, then you'll see a de-escalation of the conflict. The Russians, as I said, will come back to their original entry point, the Donbass region, and will maintain a protective corridor around that pocket of eastern Ukraine, and then release their information, hopefully so that the changes that need to be made in the regime are made, and that the truth comes out as to the corruption. And also, I think we need to look again at how NATO played a role in escalating this situation by encouraging war. I believe it was a mistake for NATO to expand. It broke an arrangement it had with Russia. When the Soviet Union broke up, NATO assured the administration, the new administration of Russia, that NATO would not expand. That promise was broken. NATO expanded into Czech Republic, into East Germany, into Poland, into the Baltic states, so that Russia felt threatened by having this potential weaponized adversary not far from their borders, within striking range with medium-range missiles, so rockets. So we'll see. Just looking at my notes, and I want to draw this to a close because I've been talking too long. I think what we'll do is the second part of the discussion between the U.S. senators and Ms. Beto, who was leading this discussion for the World Economic Forum. The second part was climate change and how the U.S. has been addressing climate change, and I think we'll save that for next week. In the meantime, I'm going to draw this to a close. I hope you found this interesting. It's just my perspective from the news sources that I've consulted, and also my own ponderings, my own considerations. And I want the conflict to end. I also want the truth to come out as to the motivations behind Putin's invasion. I want the truth to come out about and evidence as to his accusations against the Ukrainian government and its NATO supporters. There's a lot that has to be addressed. You've got two bullies here. Putin is a bully, but NATO is also a bully. And so I think between bullies you need a neutral zone, and Ukraine needs to be that neutral zone. Otherwise you're going to have a fight, and I don't want us, the United States, getting involved in a fight, two bullies that really would ill serve us to get involved with. I think once the American people are given unfiltered news and their leaders in Washington are given unfiltered news and are held accountable to respond to this unfiltered news and act according to our laws and Constitution, then perhaps we will have a more well thought out foreign policy and not be acting out of pure emotion by looking at potentially doctored pictures of war crimes. And this way avoid armed conflicts that not only have a large carbon footprint, I'll leave that as an allusion to the climate change, but also cost many lives and ruin many lives. I want to remind everybody that we spent 20 years in Afghanistan, not too long after 9/11, and we attempted to take Afghanistan out of the hands of the Taliban. The Taliban had been ruling in Afghanistan in the 90s since the withdrawal of Soviet troops in 89 or 88. And they are back today. The Taliban is running Afghanistan. And during that 20-year hiatus of Taliban occupation and governance, we lost 2,430 service people killed in action. We had 1,646 American and women military personnel come back amputees, missing a limb or more than one limb. And we had, during that 20-year period, over 22,000 come back wounded. So this Memorial Day, I wish you all to remember the importance of foreign policy, the importance of clear planning and accountable goals, and people that are accountable who are directing our young people to serve in very hostile, dangerous environments, often demanding the ultimate sacrifice. And it infuriates me that we have people who have never served, politicians sending young people off to wars that are ill-conceived, that they cannot win. The billboards in Philadelphia say the Marines fight to win. Well, the Marines fight to win, but the politicians who send them over there to fight do not. All right? So remember that. Foreign policy matters. Our soldiers' lives matter. Much more than the good name of any politician. So, prayer of thanks for what they were trying to do, and a prayer that the American people come to realize they've been ill-served in their leadership, and it has been very costly. And Memorial Day, we need to remember that cost in human lives, lost or terribly altered. So, thank you. God bless. Have a good Memorial Day weekend, and I'll be back next Thursday, roughly this time, and we'll discuss climate change as addressed by this World Economic Forum and our U.S. senators and congresspeople. Thank you. Bye-bye.